Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2018 movie titled Death Wish. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to two police officers in the aftermath of a gunfight. One of them is fatally wounded with multiple gunshots to the chest, while the other rushes him to the hospital. Upon arrival, trauma surgeon Paul Kersey is called to attend to the injured officer. Unfortunately, before he can take any action, the cop passes away due to severe blood loss. The scene then cuts to Paul's home, where we meet his wife Lucy and their daughter Jordan. They seem to be very close to each other and often share all their secrets. Later, they attend one of Jordan's soccer games, where an annoying parent starts berating the referee. Paul playfully asks him to relax, but the man begins insulting him. This angers Paul, but before he can retaliate, his wife interrupts and takes him away. Following the game, the Kersey family goes out for lunch with Paul's brother Frank. They have a fun time chatting about their lives and work. After the meal, a valet named Miguel approaches them to retrieve their car. While doing so, he overhears the family talking about their upcoming plans. He soon realizes that they are filthy rich, and this consumes his mind with greed. So later, as Miguel is handling their car, he secretly takes a photo of their address. On Wednesday evening, the Kersey family prepares for Paul's birthday dinner, but just as they're about to leave, he receives an urgent call to the hospital for an operation, forcing them to postpone the celebration. After Paul departs, the girls go shopping to gather supplies for a surprise birthday cake, having forgotten to prepare one for tonight. An hour later, they return home, unaware of a white van ominously parked nearby. In the next scene, Lucy begins baking a cake while Jordan is upstairs. All seems well until Lucy notices an open window and discovers dirty footprints inside. Alarmed, she calls for Jordan, unaware that a masked intruder is holding her daughter hostage. The intruder's leader enters, gun drawn, demanding Lucy open the safe. With no choice, she hands over their valuables. Meanwhile, Jordan is tied up with two accomplices. One attempts to assault her, but the other intervenes, sparking an argument that allows Jordan to grab a knife and slash one intruder's face. Lucy arrives just in time to throw boiling water at the assailant, but this enrages the leader, who retaliates by shooting both mother and daughter. Following the attack, they are rushed to the same hospital where Paul is working. He gets to know that two severely injured patients have been brought in and goes to check. But as soon as he enters the room, he is devastated to learn that they are his own wife and daughter. Tragically, Lucy passes away shortly after arriving at the hospital, while Jordan falls into a coma. Later, Paul is visited by detectives Kevin Raines and Leonore Jackson, who are conducting an investigation on the case. They ask him several questions and finally come to the conclusion that the incident was a robbery gone wrong. A few days later, Paul seeks help from a therapist to cope with the trauma. He also shares about his struggles to sleep, as he has been experiencing a lot of nightmares lately. In response, the therapist advises him to take proper rest and hands him some antidepressant pills. That evening, while taking a walk, Paul encounters two men harassing a woman. He tries to intervene but ends up getting beaten up by the men. In the next scene, as Paul is watching TV, he comes across an advertisement for a gun store. Intrigued, he decides to explore the idea of owning a firearm himself. He later visits the store, where he is helped by a friendly staff member. She walks him through the process of obtaining a gun and provides him with essential information. However, Paul decides to take some time to consider his decision before walking away. On another day at the hospital, Paul is called upon to perform surgery on a gunshot victim as they try to move the patient onto the operating table. A gun falls out of his pocket. Paul then discreetly kicks the firearm under the bed and retrieves it later without attracting any attention. Once home, he examines the gun and begins learning all he can about firearms. Over the next few weeks, he continues his work at the hospital during the day and dedicates his evenings to practicing shooting. One evening, Paul goes out for a walk, disguised in a hoodie with the gun hidden in his pocket. As he strolls through the streets, he unexpectedly encounters two men assaulting a couple. They beat up the man and steal his car, but before they can flee, Paul fires at the car's tires, causing it to swerve and crash into a pole. The recoil from the gun injures his hand, but he managed to retrieve his weapon. He then shoots at the remaining attacker, killing him on the spot. In the aftermath of this incident, Paul rescues the woman inside the car before fleeing the scene. Unbeknownst to him, a woman at a nearby cafe has recorded the entire incident on her phone. The detectives arrive at the scene shortly after and are shocked by the violent nature of the killings. But the only lead they can find is that the killer was a white guy in a hoodie and that his hand was injured during the confrontation. The following day, the woman who recorded the shooting uploads the video online, and it quickly goes viral. Paul watches the video and discovers that he's earned the title, the Grim Reaper. Later, at the hospital, he tends to his injured hand before beginning his work. He then attends to a new patient, a young boy who was shot in the leg by a local drug dealer known as the Ice Cream Man. Paul learns that this guy is a violent man who shoots people for no reason. Therefore, he decides to take matters into his own hands. He coerces the boy to reveal the Ice Cream Man's address, then later heads there, disguised in a hoodie. As soon as Paul spots the man, he fatally shoots him in broad daylight before making a run for it. The news once again goes viral, and the hooded man starts being labeled as a vigilante. Some support his actions and call him a guardian angel taking down criminals, but others criticize him and argue that justice should be left to the authorities. Meanwhile, Detective Rains and Jackson arrive at the crime scene, where the Ice Cream Man was killed. They find the same description of the shooter, a white guy in a hoodie. This time, Detective Rains re-watches the viral video of the Grim Reaper and realizes that the assailant is left-handed. Following this, Paul is called upon to attend to another gunshot victim at the hospital. To his shock, he recognizes the person as Miguel, the valet from the restaurant. He also notices him wearing his stolen watch in his hands. Paul still tries his best to save him, but the shady valet ends up passing away. Later, Paul finds Miguel's phone and discreetly unlocks it using his fingerprint. Upon examining the device, he stumbles upon a photo of his own address taken inside his car. This confirms his suspicion that Miguel was involved in the robbery and murder. Paul then delves further into Miguel's messages and discovers that the stolen items, including his watch, are being sold at a nearby pawn shop disguised as a liquor store. Later that evening, Paul heads to the said location and discovers the pawn shop when questioned by the owner, Ponytail claims that he was sent by Miguel. However, this raises suspicion, prompting Ponytail to alert someone named Fish. He then reaches for his gun, but Paul notices this through a mirror and swiftly stabs him in the hand. With Ponytail subdued, Paul holds him at gunpoint and demands to be led to his stolen belongings. At the same time, Fish shows up at the store. He rushes to the back and fires a shot at him. Paul somehow manages to dodge the bullet, but it ends up striking Ponytail, killing him instantly. After a violent altercation, Fish is shot in the leg, prompting Paul to demand the identity of his wife's killer. Reluctantly, Fish reveals that his friend Joe pulled the trigger. Just as Paul seeks more information, Fish turns on him, but a bowling ball falls from a shelf, striking Fish and causing him to accidentally shoot himself. Seizing the moment, Paul collects the surveillance tapes and escapes but drops his recovered ring in the process. Back home, he drills holes in the tapes to render them unusable before disposing of them. The next day, Detectives Rains and Jackson visit him at the hospital. They show him a photo of Fish for identification, but Paul denies knowing the man. The detectives then reveal that he was found dead, and Paul's stolen ring was recovered from the crime scene. With this evidence, they believe it's only a matter of time before they uncover the rest of his team. Later on, Paul tracks down Joe at his auto shop and incapacitates him with a wrench. He then positions Joe underneath a car and proceeds to torture him by making a clean cut on his leg and pouring brake fluid on the wound. Joe finally confesses that a man named Knox arranged the entire scheme. Upon learning this, Paul pulls a chain to release the crowbar, and the car gruesomely crushes him. In the next scene, Paul receives a text from Knox to meet at a nightclub. Meanwhile, Frank visits Paul's home and discovers his firearm collection, realizing that the infamous vigilante is his brother. At the nightclub, Paul is lured into the bathroom, where he calls Knox, only to hear the phone ringing in a stall. He shoots through the door, but it's a trap. Knox shoots him from behind, sparking a chaotic gunfight that leaves both men wounded. As chaos erupts and patrons flee, Paul blends into the crowd and escapes while Knox contacts detectives, feigning innocence as a bystander. Back at home, Paul uses his medical knowledge to patch up his gunshot wound. He then goes to the basement, where he finds Frank waiting for him. When confronted about his actions, Paul defends himself, arguing that someone must take justice into their own hands. Shortly after, they receive a call from the hospital, informing them that Jordan has finally woken up from her coma. Paul rushes to meet her, and the first thing he does is reveal that her mother passed away. A week later, Paul brings Jordan home after her hospital discharge and legally purchases a firearm for their protection, anticipating retaliation from their enemies. One night, he spots a figure darting across their lawn and quickly hides Jordan in a closet. To his shock, it's Knox, back with two accomplices. Paul is prepared and swiftly takes down the goons, but Knox outsmarts him and shoots him in the shoulder. Just as Knox moves in to finish Paul off, Jordan arrives, distracting Knox long enough for Paul to grab a large gun from under the table and shoot Knox, finally ending the threat. After the incident, Detective Rains arrives to investigate, already knowing Paul's true identity. To help him, Rains concocts a story that Knox returned out of fear of being recognized by Jordan, leading to a self-defense altercation where Paul killed Knox. With the case closed and revenge fulfilled, Paul and his daughter begin to rebuild their lives. Weeks later, as Paul walks down the street, he spots a man stealing luggage. Leaving his vigilante past behind, he playfully pretends to shoot the thief with his finger instead of intervening. Thank you for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.